one of the people in the industry that I've known for, well, quite a while, and is relevant, I think, in my whole career is Mr. Curtis Preston, Mr. Backup. You have always been somebody that I've been able to rely on, somebody I've been able to call on to answer my questions, and somebody who knows more about data protection than probably anybody else in the industry. Thanks for coming to Field Day. Thanks for being part of the Gestalt IT delegate community. Tell us a little bit about your background and kind of who you are.
So you go all the way back to my first job in IT, just over 30 years ago. I got the job as the backup guy, just like a lot of people did. And and like a lot of people, it wasn't the job I wanted. It was a job in computers. And so I became the backup guy. And then through a series of things that honestly were not in my control, I just never got out of backup. And a few years later, I started writing. I caught the publishing bug. Next thing you know, I wrote a book. Now I've written like 4 books. And once you're known for something, well, that's it, right?
Yeah.
So I do see myself as like, at least not the person, but one of the people in this industry who are clinging to this idea that back up all the things, right? I know you've created this amazing thing that's so resilient and can handle all of these things. I just want a copy of it somewhere, some way, right? No, I'm not talking about putting it on tape, okay? I'm just talking about some way to be able to recover it. And that's what I see as my focus, and I don't shy away from the term backup. A lot of people, do, but I don't.
Yeah, I think that's, well, first, I think that's absolutely accurate from what I've known you as for years. But also, I think it's incredibly relevant, and I wouldn't be ashamed if I were you of the term backup. I wouldn't be ashamed to be Mr. Backup. I mean, it's no joke that you really probably do have more experience in data protection, in archiving, recovery, ransomware than probably anybody else in the industry, simply because, like you said, this is what you built your career around. This is what you've done. You've worked with and at so many different backup products and backup companies. You've worked with so many end users that you probably do have more direct personal experience with data protection than anyone. And frankly, if somebody with that experience comes to me and says, what you really need to do is have another copy of the thing, then I think that's probably good advice.
Yeah, it's funny. Historically, what I was fighting in the first, let's say, 15 to 20 years of my career was the laws of physics, right? Tape just never quite did what we wanted it to do, right? Especially if you tried to do what most people did with it. And so that's what I spent most of my time with. And then we got things like disk-based backup and dedupe and cloud-based backup. And suddenly, I'm not fighting so much physics. What I'm fighting is logic. Literally, what I spend all my time arguing these days is, yes, you need to make a backup of that thing. And the biggest example would be anything in the SaaS category. And it's definitely the biggest concern that I have is that I just want to make people. There's just been so many incidents of ransomware, and that's, by the way, I'm definitely not ashamed of the phrase backup. The ransomware, I don't know what you want to call this massive thing that's happening, has definitely caused so many people to rethink their backup and recovery infrastructure. So it's been a time for somebody like me to be able to say something.
Yeah. So as I said, you worked at a data protection company.
Right.
You worked at Druva for a long time. You helped them to build themselves into, frankly, a credible voice in the enterprise data protection world. And now you're on your own. But even through all that, you had podcasts, you've written books, you've written articles, you've written articles for us and for a lot of other things. Tell me a little bit more about that, about sharing your information, sharing your knowledge, creating content. Where do people encounter you?
Well, the easiest place would be either backupcentral.com or backupwrapup.com. So Backup Wrap Up is my podcast. For those of you that are familiar with the podcast, it's the same podcast that I've done for 4 years now. We just renamed it The Restore It All podcast is now Backup Wrap Up. And that's what I'm putting most of my energy into right now. Is it's a weekly podcast that we've done.
A long time.
We have over 200 episodes at this point, and it's a great independent podcast that talks about either each episode tries to tackle one basic concept. We also have guests on. Sometimes we bring on product vendors. Sometimes we bring on just a subject matter expert. And then about half the time it's just me and my co-host, Prasanna, trying to discuss some basic concept of backup.
So you've rebranded it. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that the concept has changed? Does that mean that the industry has changed? Or does that just mean that you're trying to better engage with the audience?
It's been just trying to expand the audience, right? I went through a process of a guy that helps people sort of take their podcast to the next level. And we just determined that the Restore It All name wasn't a name that people outside the current listener base, the audience had flattened. And so hopefully
For one thing,
the
it
new
doesn't
name
have the word backup in it.
Well, so that's what we decided was it had to have the word backup in it. And then after looking at 40 different names, we settled on Backup Wrap Up. Yeah, the content will stay the same. Same people, same content, everything will be the same, just tightening it up a little bit here and there.
Well, and just like the backup concept, I don't think there's any shame in going through marketing exercises because what you're doing with the podcast and what you've always done with the podcasts and with the articles and with the presentations at events and everything is basically trying to share this knowledge with the industry. And I think that that's laudable because, again, I'm not ashamed of marketing. I think content marketing is the best marketing because essentially what you're doing is here's a thing of value. I've got more like that in the back.
Right.
If you come back next week, I'll give you another thing of value.
Right.
And I'll just keep doing this as long as you want me to do it. If you want to work closer with me, I'd be happy to.
Right.
But here's a thing of value.
Right.
And I think that's exactly what you're doing with the podcast. And I think that if you can reach more people, then all you're doing is enriching the entire community.
Yeah, that's the idea. And that's also what I do on a contract basis with the companies. That's what I've done since, for a really long time, has just been content generation. I am one of the few people that can speak from a place of authority on backup and recovery, disaster recovery, and that if I say something, that it's coming from me. I mean, I built an independent podcast while I worked for a vendor, and it somehow developed an audience. So I think that shows that I have this independent voice, and so I'm doing that, yes, on the podcast and also for vendors that need that for them.
And exactly, and I think that it's about having that independent voice, about having it be focused on the content, and like I said, it's about giving people value. And I've always been one of those people who also believes that value and information is not something that you can really hoard. I think sometimes people think, if I give out my advice for free, then they won't have to pay me for it. But that's not really how this stuff works because, you're talking about, either general information or specific use cases that are not the same as what these people are dealing with. But, so it's useful, but it's not like, you're kind of closing the door on working with them or on giving them something more custom.
Yeah, no, this guy that I'm following, which his podcast is called Grow the Show, he gives all his advice away for free. And then yet I have paid him to follow his very structured process. So I think that's, that works for both the podcast, it works for vendors that are trying to sell a product. If you give out information that is useful and helpful, people say, oh, these people seem to know what's going on and they care about me, not just wanting to sell me a product. Right. And so, and then they go, oh, what is it that they happen to sell? I think that is just the best way to sell these days.
So you and I met each other back in the Expo trade show days, where we would present at events and present, and that's kind of how we got to know each other. And then blogging came along,
Yep.
and so we were writing a lot of independent articles on our own, on our blogs. And really, the blog was kind of a publication that we owned and we could control with a free distribution of information. Twitter came and went, unfortunately. And now we're in a land of LinkedIn and podcasts. How would you classify that sort of what people used to call bloggers? What are we now?
I think blogging is still a thing, but at least in terms of the things that I consume, I am all about LinkedIn these days.
Yeah.
And so I get so much great advice from people that I'm following on LinkedIn. And so in addition to my podcast, I'm trying to be that voice, and I've been learning about how LinkedIn works and how to share information on LinkedIn and get it much more engaged. Once you understand how the LinkedIn algorithm works, and it's not just posting something on LinkedIn and then walking away, right? It's posting it and getting people to engage with it. It's amazing how many more people will see a post. My most recent post on LinkedIn last week, 10,000 views.
Wow.
I never had that many views on a blog post in my life, right? But I'm posting that on LinkedIn, and then I've learned how to tweak the algorithm to get people to respond, and then somehow that causes LinkedIn to show it to other people. So I think a lot of bloggers are now on LinkedIn. Twitter has become, I don't know, just worthless. And I do think for a different audience, podcasts.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's a different type of content. I mean,
Right.
I am absolutely the mow the lawn listening to podcasts person. I know a lot of people are as well. And yet I agree with you on LinkedIn. One of the things that I would say about LinkedIn is that sometimes SEO can feel like a bad word, or LinkedIn optimization or LinkedIn strategies or something like that can feel like a bad word. But again, it comes back to this. Are you sharing valuable information that is going to help people and enrich their lives or their careers? If yes, then why wouldn't you go the extra mile to make it visible to those people,
Right.
help them find it, help them engage with it, and have honest and actual engagement back with them?
Right.
And that's really what LinkedIn is wanting you to do. It
Right.
reminds me of the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which always rubbed me wrong as a kid, because I was always like, ew, it's about like scamming people into being your friend. But then I read it and I'm like, no, it's not. It's about having genuine interaction with people and actually caring about who they are and what they say. Honestly, I think that's really what we're doing here.
Yeah. LinkedIn is the best way right now to interact with people, both people that you know and people that you don't know, because with that exposure, when you write something on LinkedIn and then someone comments on it, your post gets shown on their page, which then shows it to people that you don't know, and it's just, I think it's just a great way to communicate right now.
Yeah, it's a virtuous cycle. So before we go, first off, what should people who are watching this and they're interested in data protection, ransomware, et cetera, how can they best learn and engage with you and just learn these topics?
I would say if they're a podcast person, just go to backuprapup.com or search for that in their favorite podcatcher. And if they're a LinkedIn person, linkedin.com/in/Mr. Backup, MR Backup, and or backupcentral.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And if you're interested in these videos, go find Gestalt IT on LinkedIn or go to gestaltit.com. You can also find Tech Field Day on both of those, both of those universes. And also, of course, our podcasts, the On-Premise IT podcast, Utilizing Tech, and the Gestalt IT Rundown.